A Roman soldier's biggest threat wasn't the enemy. It was the man standing right next to you. The Roman army was a machine of absolute discipline. But what happens when that machine finally breaks down? How do you terrify men completely unafraid of death? The answer is a brutal, psychological weapon. It was an ancient practice simply called decimation. Today, the word just means severe, widespread destruction. Back then, it was a strict mathematical formula for terror. You didn't just die, you were murdered by your brothers. Imagine standing in the cold light of a Roman morning. The year is exactly 71 BC. Spartacus is currently tearing through the wealthy Italian countryside. General Marcus Crassus watches his own men flee in panic. This sudden cowardice is a highly lethal infection. Crassus knows the only cure is a heavy dose of blood. He doesn't just punish the specific men who ran away. He decides to punish the entire unit to set an example. The guilty cohort is ordered to assemble without their weapons. 500 men stand shivering in the cold, defensive mud. They are divided into small groups of exactly 10 men. These are the ancient equivalent of a modern military squad. These 10 men ate together, slept together, and fought together. They were significantly closer than their own biological families. Have you ever had to choose between your life and a friend's? The general walks down the silent line holding a wooden box. Inside are small stones, and 1 in 10 is completely black. The men must reach inside and blindly pull out their fate. Roman historian Polybius documented this horrifying ritual in deep detail. The drawing was totally random, blind to rank or bravery. 9 men pull out a white stone and gasp in relief. The 10th man pulls out a black stone, and his world ends. He is immediately dragged out of the line and stripped bare. But the executioner isn't a stranger with an axe. The executioners are the 9 men holding the white stones. The general hands heavy wooden clubs to the surviving squad members. They are ordered to beat their 10th brother to death. If they refuse to swing, the entire squad will be executed. The psychological weight of this moment is impossible to comprehend. It was a perfectly designed system of mutual, shared trauma. The victim wasn't a traitor, he was just mathematically unlucky. The survivors were forcefully turned into grieving murderers. Modern military psychologist Dr. Richard Gabriel studied this combat stress. He concluded that decimation intentionally shattered basic human trust. It forced soldiers to fear their commanders more than the enemy. As the clubs fall, sickening sounds echo across the massive camp. Blood permanently soaks into the cold, damp Italian soil. The man who saved your life yesterday is now crushing your skull. There is no honor in this death, only raw animal survival. How long would those 9 men see his face in their nightmares? When the brutal beating is over, the horrific punishment continues. The 9 survivors are forbidden to wash the blood off their hands. They are publicly disgraced in front of the entire Roman legion. They are forcefully banished outside the protective walls of the camp. They remain totally exposed to enemy attacks and the freezing night. Their daily wheat rations are permanently replaced with raw barley. Barley was considered animal feed, humiliating for a Roman citizen. They must eat this shameful food covered in their friend's blood. This ritual lasts for days, stripping them of all human dignity. The message is painfully clear. Failure completely erases your humanity. Decimation was extremely rare, reserved only for massive mutinies. The Roman Senate actually feared the practice might spark rebellions. But generals like Crassus knew it worked with cold efficiency. After the blood soaked the mud, his legion never retreated again. They marched forward and eventually crushed Spartacus entirely. History usually remembers the glorious victories and the shiny golden eagles. We constantly build towering statues to generals who conquered the world. But those vast empires were never built on courage or noble ideals. They were constructed on a hidden foundation of uncompromising terror. Would you have the immense strength to swing the club? Centuries later, another emperor resurrected this terrifying, ancient ghost. The year is 298 AD, during the chaotic reign of Maximian. The Theban legion was stationed in modern-day Switzerland. They were highly trained veterans harboring a massive, dangerous secret. Most of these hardened killers had quietly converted to Christianity. The emperor ordered his army to sacrifice to traditional Roman gods. He also commanded them to violently slaughter local Christian villagers. The Theban legion, led by Commander Maurice, politely refused the order. Maximian was absolutely furious at this sudden display of defiance. He immediately ordered the entire legion to be formally decimated. 6,600 men formed up in silent ranks. The grim lottery of the black and white stones began again. 660 men were pulled from the quiet lines. They were systematically slaughtered by their own weeping brothers. But this time, the calculated terror failed to break their spirits. The surviving soldiers still firmly refused to worship the pagan emperor. Maximian ordered a second decimation, doubling down on the bloodshed. Another 600 men were brutally beaten to death in the dirt. Yet, the remaining soldiers stood perfectly still, accepting their fate. Why does absolute power always panic when pain fails to command? According to legend, the emperor eventually lost his mind with rage. He ordered the entire Theban legion to be completely wiped out. Thousands of men were executed in an unimaginable, massive bloodbath. While historians debate the numbers, the dark psychological truth remains. Decimation only works if victims value survival over their own souls. The Roman war machine relied on men acting like uniform cogs. Individual thought was considered a highly dangerous glitch in the system. Decimation was the ultimate reset button for this violent biological computer. It forcefully erased friendships and reinstalled blind, absolute obedience. It proved the state owned your life, your death, and your conscience. The practice slowly faded as the mighty Roman Empire eventually collapsed. But the dark shadow of this psychological warfare never truly vanished. In World War I, Italian General Luigi Cadorna revived the nightmare. When his modern troops retreated at Caporetto, he completely snapped. He randomly selected fleeing Italian soldiers to be shot by firing squad. The ancient Roman ghost was breathing cold air in the 20th century. Men in modern muddy trenches died for a formula invented in antiquity. The human brain hasn't fundamentally changed since the days of Crassus. Raw fear is still the most efficient tool for controlling massive populations. Have we really evolved, or do we just use cleaner methods? Let's look closely at the grim math of survival in the ancient world. A Roman legion consisted of roughly 5,000 heavily armed combatants. If a full legion was decimated, 500 men died in one morning. That is an entire modern high school entirely wiped out by blunt trauma. And every single murderer was forced to return to their daily tasks. Imagine sitting around the campfire on that exact same cold evening. There is an empty, haunting spot where your best friend used to sit. You look at your hands and see his dried blood under your fingernails. You look at the 8 other men, and nobody speaks a single word. The awful silence is heavier than the wooden club you swung today. This was the true, hidden cost of the famous Pax Romana. The legendary Roman peace was bought with rivers of internal violence. The magnificent marble temples were funded by men whose souls were broken. They were miserable prisoners chained to a massive, endless wheel of trauma. The empire didn't just conquer the world, it completely consumed its own. Modern society often looks back at Rome with a deep sense of awe. We deeply admire the intricate aqueducts and the towering Colosseum. We constantly praise their advanced legal systems and brilliant military strategy. But beneath the shiny marble veneer lies a dark, terrifying truth. How much hidden suffering are we willing to ignore for historical glory? Every time you see a proud Roman eagle, remember the black stones. Remember the 9 men openly weeping as they gripped heavy wooden clubs. The true strength of Rome wasn't their superior weapons or brilliant tactics. It was their absolute willingness to become monsters to maintain total order. They weaponized human trauma on a scale that still shocks historians today. So, the next time you hear someone say we should emulate Rome, the next time a politician blindly praises their incredible, unmatched discipline, think deeply about the cold, muddy ground on that tragic Italian morning. Think about the awful choice between your breathing lungs and your brother's skull. Civilizations aren't remembered solely for how they brutally treat their foreign enemies. They are ultimately defined by how they choose to treat their own people. Decimation wasn't a standard act of warfare. It was domestic, psychological terrorism. The greatest trick the Roman Empire ever pulled was making us admire them. They convinced history that their unimaginable cruelty was just necessary military discipline. But if your civilization requires forcing brothers to murder brothers to survive, it isn't a highly advanced civilization at all. It is a highly organized slaughterhouse. You don't build a beautiful, lasting legacy with blood-stained wooden clubs. You just ensure that your ghosts will scream forever in the dark,